I'm continuing to work with the company file I've been using all along, but if you're just joining us, you can go to the Chapter 16 folder to find a copy that you can use. The first thing I need to do in this particular instance is to disable all of the automated stuff that QuickBooks wants to do with employees and actually put it back to manual, because I'm not going to be using any services. And they don't really make this that intuitive or that easy. You kind of have to search really hard, or in this case, take the class and I'll tell you how to do it. So I need to turn on manual calculations. To do that, I'm going to go to the upper right side of my screen, click on the Help button, click on the Search tab, and I'm going to type manual calculations. Then I'll press enter. We'll see that there are about 15 topics found. I'm going to click on the first one. Then we have to read through on the bottom of the screen a lot of information about why we should not be using manual calculations, why we should be consulting with an accountant and or using a service. We know all of that, and we'll say thank you for sharing. And if we scroll down a lot, then we'll finally see the link that we need. And it's just very interesting that this isn't a setting anywhere. It's actually something you have to go through with the help system. So I'll click the link that says Set My Company File to Use Manual Calculations. Gives us a little warning in the center of our screen about if we have services, then those are going to be canceled, or we'll need to call to cancel them actually. So I'll say OK. I'll close the help screen to give us a little bit more room to work. There we go. Now we're all ready to go. If you would have looked at the employees menu before we did that, there would have only been a couple of options, one of which, of course, was to view services and subscribe. Now that we have manual calculations on, we do have more options in the employees menu. And if you go over to the lists menu, you will see that we also have a payroll item list. Neither of these things were available if you did not turn on manual calculations. So what we need to do is start the process of setting things up. I'll say that we are not going to set everything up. This is not going to be a complete demonstration because there's just too much of it to do, and also because depending on your location, you will have different things to set up. So I'm just going to do some samples. The way we always start, though, is by going to the Edit menu and coming down to Preferences and go to Payroll and Employees. Then you need to click the Company Preferences tab. First thing you have to do is kind of get the availability, all of this stuff. If you say no payroll, what that actually means is you're not doing payroll at all and everything is grayed out. If you have complete payroll, then you would click on that option and you would get some different things that you could work with. In our case, we want to select full payroll, so all of these things become available for us. We'll go through the checkboxes first because they're the easiest, then we'll start working through the buttons. You can copy earning details from previous paychecks when you create the next paycheck. So if people are being consistent, that'll save you some time and some data entry. You can also recall the quantity field on paychecks, hour field on paychecks, and you can use job costing and item tracking for paycheck expenses, which we might want to do. Near the bottom of the screen, we can see how we're going to display the employee list by first name or last name. If we want to mark all of our new employees by default as sales reps, which will add them to the sales rep drop-down when you create invoices, and or do we want to display employee social security numbers in headers on reports. You need to be careful with that one because if you leave reports laying around, it of course gives the full social security number to anybody who may pick that up. So that's not usually a good idea these days. Now we're going to go to the right-hand side and we're going to start working through buttons. First of all, we'll click Pay Stub and Voucher Printing. So this is only for the printing of things. What do you want on your paycheck vouchers only? The employee address, the company address, the pay period, and the check memo. Those are usually a good idea. On the paycheck vouchers and pay stubs, what do you want? Vacation used and available. If you're not giving vacation, then of course you could disable that, as well as sick time. The legal company name, your federal EIN number, a DBA, non-taxable items, social security number, and only the last 4 digits of social security and bank account numbers. Well, I'm not even going to show the social security number. I'm going to remove that completely. Hours for salaried, and then you can work with your font sizes, large or small. The only thing I'm going to change here is my particular company doesn't give vacation and sick time. We give personal time. So I'm going to disable the sick leave. I'm going to leave vacation enabled, but I'm going to change the name of it from vacation to personal time. In our particular instance, we don't care what they're doing. We found that when we have sick leave that people kind of, I'm sick, when they're really not because they want to have a vacation day. By just giving personal time, it makes it lumped all into one, and they can use it any way they see fit. So that's really all you have to do for that particular button. We'll click OK, and we'll move on to some of the more complicated stuff. Let's click on the sick and vacation option. This is how they're going to accrue things. Remember that we're only using one. So for sick, print as sick, you can do the accrual period. And these are, does it accrue at the beginning of the period, with every paycheck, or every hour on the paycheck? You have to determine for your company how this is accrued. You also can set hours for the beginning of the year if that's appropriate, the maximum number of hours they can ever carry, so if you max out on that, and you can choose to reset the hours if it doesn't roll over, if it's a use it or lose it type of situation. Now, we're not doing that one, remember, so I'm actually going to come down to my personal time, which vacation now says printed as personal time, and I can do the accruals here as well. Just to make this a little easier so I don't have to do any math, we are going to let it all accrue at the beginning of the year. And I'm going to say that we give our employees, we'll say 3 weeks. If you take 40 hours a week times 3 weeks, that should be 120 hours. We don't have a maximum number of hours, and we don't reset the hours each new year, so that's fine. The last set of options is how you accrue. In other words, do you accrue sick and vacation hours on sick and vacation hours paid, and or on overtime. And I'm going to leave those off. They only earn it on straight time. Kind of like earning interest on interest is what this is. Now I'll say OK. And now I'm going to go down and click on Employee Defaults. And this is where it starts to get interesting and a little bit involved. I now need to start setting up some of the defaults and the accounts and things that I'm going to be using. This will not be a complete payroll setup. I'm just going to give you some examples of the things that you have to do. And the first one is you have to set up a payroll schedule. Now that just simply means when do people get paid. So I'll click on the drop down, click Add New. We have a variety of options, but first we have to give it a name. I'm going to call this Regular. Then we have some choices from the drop down. Daily, weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. I'm glad I don't have to get paid annually and try to manage money for an entire year, but for a lot of people it will be something like weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly. I'm going to go ahead and choose monthly. We're just going to pay people on every month. And what is the pay period end date? And we'll say the 31st, which would be the end of the month. So the pay period ends on the 31st. What date should appear on the paychecks for this period? Well, for that one, we do things very quickly. The date that will appear is August 1st. What day should appear on paychecks for this period? And we'll also do the 1st. Okay, so that's pretty easy. You can have multiples of these if you pay different people different ways. We pay everybody on a monthly schedule, so I'll say OK. And it's giving me a little box that says your regular payroll schedule has been set up. We can do more. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we have to do that. The pay frequency then, of course, is monthly. Now we need to go over and start creating some of our list items. Now you could also do this by going to the lists and setting up payroll items. I'm just going to do it from here because this is where we're at. I'm going to click the drop down, and there aren't any yet, so I'll click Add New. Brings up a special wages type of wizard. I'm going to set up hourly wages. Next. This is for regular, not overtime or vacation. Next. Name used on paychecks. Let's just call it hourly wage. That's all I have to do. Click Next again. What account does it come out of? You should have a payroll expenses account already. We'll leave that as it is, and we'll say Finish. Now, normally I would go through and set up all of the different things that I need for earnings. What else can they do to make money? I probably have some exempt or some salaried employees that I could do. At the bottom of this box, and we'll see this box again for each employee that we set up, but remember this is the defaults. I can come down here and I can also say Add New. What might I be taking deductions for? And this can be all kinds of stuff. This is where you can get really carried away. I'm going to say it's just a regular deduction. Notice I can also do additions, like maybe I have a reimbursement for mileage or things like that. I'll say Next. This deduction is going to be for charities. And if any of you work for large companies, you know sometimes you can give donations, say $5 a paycheck or a one-time donation. That's what I'm trying to get set up here. Click Next. Name of the agency to which the liability is paid and the number that identifies you to the agency. Now, I'm going to make this up just because we're doing a class and we can't give any real names. It's not in the vendor list. We'll just do a quick add, and I'll enter a number. And then you can have a liability account to which that is paid. We'll just leave it at payroll liabilities for now. I'll say Next. For tax tracking, you can put in your tax purposes if it applies there. We'll say Next. We can now check which taxes will be affected by this. In other words, you have a lot of pre- and post-tax types of contributions. We'll go ahead and say that this is all pre-tax. Calculate the item based on quantity, based on hours, or neither. This is just a flat fee, so we'll say Next again. And we'll put in a default of maybe $5. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that need to be thought about when we do all of this. I'll click Finish, and we'll finish this one up. So when you do this on your own, or somebody else will be able to do it, you're going to need to do a couple of different categories. Let me click OK to close this one off, get back to our box. On the top, you're going to create all of the list items of the way people make money. On the bottom, you're going to create all kinds of different deductions that there can be. And obviously, there are some that are standard and some that may be special for you. We're going to create a payroll schedule, a pay frequency if that's required. And then the last thing I'm going to do is work with these buttons on the far right-hand side. I'm not going to worry about sick and vacation time, but I do want to show you taxes. You have federal, state, and other taxes for anybody who is basically filing on these things. You have a filing status and then what they should be earning. I'm not going to change these here. I'm going to show these to you when I do an employee, so I'll cancel. I'll say OK. That brings us back to our preferences, where now we've been through all of the options, and we should normally have everything set up as far as we can from this point. So I'll click OK, and then we'll be ready to start adding employees.